So we are going to discuss a typical day of an Agile coach. And I know that if you guys actually go and Google that, you'll get a number of articles which will basically say what an Agile coach does on a daily basis or what an Agile coach will do over a week. There are a few articles that talk about what do you do at 8 a.m. in the morning and how you finish, say, at 4 or 5 in the evening. That's not what we are going to discuss, right? I'm not going to discuss what you do on a minute by minute on a daily basis. What I will be covering is on a larger scale, every day when an Agile coach or an aspiring Agile coach or a Scrum Master or even an Agile practitioner who goes to office, what are the typical scenarios that you face on a daily basis and how do you tackle it as a coach? And that's what we are going to discuss, right? Obviously, if you want to see a day or a minute by minute setup that you do, you can always derive it from this bigger picture, and you can always throw in your questions in the chat window and we'll come back to it after the webinar and we'll discuss it. But just to give you like a caveat that I'm not going to discuss a time-based step-by-step thing that you do. I'm just going to discuss about as an Agile coach, what do you have to look out on a daily basis, all right? So just to give you an overview of who I am, my name is Vishal Prasad. You can find me easily on most of the social media handles by searching for @AgileMaven. I am an Agile coach with KnowledgeHut, and I do a lot of different roles when it comes to software delivery, right? I am also an authorized trainer for IC Agile courses, and you can see my credentials at the bottom. The credentials at the bottom actually are just to say that I have done it. That really doesn't say that I am an expert in all of these fields, but I do add a little bit of credibility to my portfolio, all right? So for this particular webinar, we are equals when we are discussing this because I know most of you are going to be aspiring Agile coaches at some point of time, or you are already an Agile coach, and we'll see how we can have this webinar more of an interactive and a dialogue based. As I said, I'll see if the microphones can be enabled. What we'll be discussing today is how does your day usually begins, and I'll discuss about as an Agile coach, what is the most important factor that you have to consider when you start your day before you go into your organization, your client's organization, or to your office. We'll discuss about the type of penguins that you will meet. And this term is, I have deliberately taken this from Kotter's well-known book called Our Iceberg is Melting. And if you get time, you can go on YouTube and you can see the video. It's a very nice video. Or you can get the book and you can read. We will also see how an Agile coach actually helps define a high-performance team and what are different ways of defining the high-performance team and clarifying it to your teams. We'll discuss about that. Now, although you have a role of an Agile coach, you have to play multiple roles as on your teams. You can be a teacher, a mentor, a coach, and we'll see in which situations you do what and why. And in the end, we'll discuss about preparing for your next steps. These will be the next steps for you as an Agile coach when you go out in your organizations. At the same time, next steps for everything that you're going to do with your teams and your team members. So this is broadly what we'll discuss in the next 25 to 30 minutes. And feel free to jot down as many questions as possible, and we'll come back to those questions and discuss that in detail. All right. So let's say what I mean by it doesn't necessarily begin with coffee. Now, all of us at some level are just humans, right? An Agile coach might be a superhero, but they are still humans. And because of that, there's a number of things that we carry in our head. We have our own parental pressures, we have our work pressures, we have pressures from the kid, we have a number of things that just circulate in our heads when we wake up in the morning, all right? A coffee can be something that helps you wake up and helps you get to work. But as an Agile coach, this is something where we have to go and take it a step further. What I mean by it doesn't necessarily begin with the coffee is how do you prepare yourself in the morning before you start an agile engagement? And not just from a technical perspective, but from a physical and a mental perspective, you need to be unbiased to everything that you're going to do at work. Now, being unbiased with a number of things in your head becomes difficult. And that's where there is a philosophy. If you go through Lisa Atkins' book on Agile Coaching, there is something known as creating a presence. As an Agile coach, when you walk into a room with your team or with your organization or your client, your presence itself should create a persona of things that are going to be taught in an unbiased manner, or things that are going to be discussed in an unbiased manner. But in order to create that, there is something that you need to do from your side, which brings you to a very calm and soothing environment. All right? Now, you might find that this is very philosophical, what I'm talking, but it actually is something that you have to think about. If you fight with your spouse, say in the morning before you go to office, and you are already in a bad mood, and then you have to go, and there is a person on your team, one of the teams that you're coaching, who is going through some problems with another team member, and they actually want to come to you and consult for advice, right? If you are not in the right state of mind, will you be able to give them the right advice that they are looking for? That is one of the most challenging aspects that Agile coaching, or rather any coach, has to face. Disconnecting themselves from their own personal fronts and being at that moment just serving the person who's in front of them. And that's what I mean by it doesn't necessarily begin with the coffee. It begins with freeing up your mind of all of these different scenarios which can lead to a biased condition when you're doing your coaching. All right? So now the question comes, how do you really achieve that? Now, there are a number of exercises which are available out there. So even if you go and Google about exercises to clear your mind, there are a number of things that you can find. There is one that I like to do with my teams during my training sessions, which I call the Sherlock Holmes Mind Palace. Now, if you guys are fans of Sherlock Holmes, you would know that there is this thing about Sherlock Holmes where he calls it a mind palace, where every information is stored in his head, and he can go and retrieve it at any point of time. Which means that he has a brilliant memory, but he keeps all of those things away in a locker, and he only goes back to them when he wants to refer it, right? So if you have seen Sherlock Holmes serials, or if you have read the book, you might be able to connect with this. If not, just go and look for Sherlock Holmes Mind Palace on YouTube and you'll understand what I'm trying to say. But if you want to do this exercise every morning before you can start your coaching assignment, the funda is very simple. You close your eyes. You imagine any kind of a place where you can store information. It can be a palace, a bank, a library, anything that has a secure locker where you can save stuff. It can also be a computer or a floppy disk or anything of a storage material. Think about each and everything that is troubling you, which can affect you on your job. Let's say that you have to pay your bills. Write that on a piece of paper and just imagine that you're locking it away in a locker in a palace. You can always go back to it in the evening when you come back, but during the day, that is something that you don't want to attend to. So it simply gets locked away. If you have had an argument with your spouse, you don't really want that to be affecting your entire day. Lock the entire argument in one of the other lockers. You do this exercise for a number of things that are going in your mind till the time your mind is completely free of all of these things. Doing this simple exercise brings you in a clear state of mind so that as a coach, when you actually go in your organization and visit your teams, you are completely devoted to them. Your attention is just your team. That's it, and no one else. Right? So try it out for yourself. Don't just listen to me. That would be rubbish. Go ahead, try this exercise tomorrow morning before you go to work and see if it really helps you out. All right. It's not going to take more than 5 to 10 minutes. You can do it at any point of time. You can, if you are taking public transport, you can also do it while you are commuting to work. It's perfectly okay. There are many other things that many people do which helps them do it. So many people do yoga or exercise or any kind of activity that takes their mind away from the necessary pressures or tensions that they are carrying. All of that is perfectly valid as well. Okay? So that's how I would suggest that an Agile coach would begin their typical day, by clearing their mind so that they can devote themselves completely to the team. Now, once that has happened, you actually end up going to your office. And what happens in the office is you meet penguins. Now, who are penguins? And I said, if you go and you look for quarters, our iceberg is melting. There are different personality types that you meet at work. All right. And there are multiple research that has been conducted in order to identify these different personality types. There are types which, say, if you go by the PRISM method, there are 4 types of personalities or dominant personalities. You will find some drivers in your organization. Now, drivers are typically people who are result-oriented. For them, you need to achieve the result. It doesn't matter how. It may also be in unethical ways. But for them, results or positive results is the most important rather than, say, maintaining relationships with people. All right. So as I'm saying this, try and imagine if you actually have someone like that at your workplace. So a driver can be, say, a person who's really pushy. Say there's a tech lead on your team who is crazy about writing software in a particular manner. And he may not be in the right state of mind to actually teach someone. For them, you just need to get things done and deliver. That is more important to the person than actually, say, teaching a fresher who has joined your team. That's a driver personality. Or a manager who's obsessed with deadlines. Things that need to go out on at that time. It doesn't matter even if you're working overtime, it doesn't matter to them. Those are drivers. Right? I mean, I'm not trying to stereotype, but these are different types of people that you will find in your organization. So try and imagine if you actually have these kind of people, right? Then there are someone who are known as analyticals. Analyticals are the type of people who prefer data over relationships. Okay? So if there is something that has to be, say, you have a product owner who's finding it hard time to prioritize requirements. Possibly, they find it hard to prioritize requirements because they are very data oriented, and if the data is very close to each other, if, say, there are 3 different types of selections that have to be made, and the difference between the selection is very little, they'll find it difficult to make decisions because the data will actually not give them the right numbers. They're very number oriented. Right? The best profession that would be like for analysts would be, say, data analysts. They would be the best at this kind of job. So if you have an analytical personality, data analysts do the best at it. The third type of personality that you might encounter is an expressive. Expressives are very relationship oriented. They value relationships over the actual goal. So for them, even if the goal is not met, but the friendship with the person with whom they are working is improved, that's pretty much awesome for them. But expressives are also the people who shout more and do less. Okay, and I'm not saying this in a bad manner, but in case something fails, they would make a big deal out of it, as an example. At the same time, they are the best people to hang out with if you want to go around and party. Okay, you'll really enjoy your time with them. And then you'll find amiables. Now, amiable personality is someone who really values relationship. If, say, there is a situation where you can get a salary hike, but giving you a salary hike means you will lose out on your best friend. They would rather prefer the best friend over a salary hike. That's the kind of people who you have amiable. Amiables are people who will always go with the majority. If the majority says that you want to have South Indian food, and if the amiable wants to eat North Indian food, they would give up their decision just for maintaining the relationship with the friends who want to go out for South Indian food. So these are different types of people who you'll meet in your organizations. Now, this is just one type of classification. There are many other types of classifications that you get based on different research. But when you get these kind of people, coaching them is different. So if you meet a driver who's constantly pressurizing the team, say for delivery, you have to coach them in order to understand that a sustainable pace is more important than pushy delivery. You need to coach the driver in order to make them understand that saying no is as important as delivering things. So your coaching changes based on the personality types of your penguin. And analytical are slow decision makers. That might be difficult on projects which are very time critical. So you may want to coach the analyticals to try and understand why they do what they do and how they can benefit the team in a much better way. Amiables may be people who never speak up in meetings. You have to coach them to make them understand that they are the part of a team and they have their opinions matter and they have to speak up when it's necessary. Expressives talk more than necessary. You have to coach them to make them realize that possibly their actions may provide different kind of scenarios which can be problematic for the team. So your penguins actually affect your style of coaching. And in order to be a good coach, you have to identify what the personality type is. Unless you identify that, you will not be able to coach them or advise them in the best possible way. So once you have entered office after you have had your coffee, you are going to meet one of your penguins. And the moment you meet the first one, your bell rings in your head about what's their personality type and how you have to deal with them. Just remember one thing, under all of these circumstances, a coach is a confidence keeper. He is the person who can be trusted by everyone. So if there are secrets which are shared with the coach, it stays with the coach. The coach and coachee have a very pure relationship. They are the people who can trust each other completely. And unless you achieve that trust with your coachee, coaching them can be difficult. So you have these different personality types on your team. None of the people in your team are equals. There is always some differentiating factor. But you still have to create a high performance team out of them. Now, many a times people say that Agile is a culture, right? Or Agile is a mindset. A number of times when this is said, the first question that comes to my mind is, culture or a mindset also needs a definition. And a number of times, many of us forget to do that. Especially if you say that your team is a high-performing team or it's high productivity or productive team. How do you actually measure that? You obviously cannot compare one team to another because they might be working on completely different projects. They might be working on solving completely different types of problems, have different type of clients. So comparing two teams in order to say that one is more productive or high performing than the other would be wrong. But within your team, if you can define high performance for every team and then see if your team is reaching those points that you have mentioned, that is something that can actually help you. Now say that you have got a brand new team and you have to start off with a project in the next week. You get, say, roughly a week's time in order to motivate the team and get them into a place so that they can actually gel together and start working on a project. Possibly the first thing that you would want to do with your team is define what high performance is going to be in your team. And in order to define high performance, there are basically three things that you have to mention. One, you have to identify what are the key values of your team. All right? I'll give you examples of what values is, but you need to have a baseline of your values. People who are Scrum Masters, Scrum values, which was introduced in the last version of Scrum Guide, can easily be the values of your team as well, and that is perfectly okay. In addition to that, there might be more values that your team might identify, but even if you take reference of values of agile teams from various different places, that's perfectly okay. That's a good place to start. The second thing that you have to identify are the enablers that reinforce those values. These can be things or practices or processes that need to be implemented. These can also be people who need to be involved. These can also be a simple thing like the work timings. Enablers are things that reinforce your values. And the third thing that you have to do is identify that if your values and enablers are in place, what are the possible benefits that your team can achieve? And these benefits is what defines high performance in your team. And let's be honest, when you define high performance, your team will not achieve every point in that benefits list on day one. Probably they will never achieve it. But every month or every iteration, when you look back to your values, enablers, and benefits, you can always judge on a subjective level of how close you are to those benefits or to that high performance team. It may also happen that your values, enablers, and benefits change after a few iterations. And that's perfectly valid as well. Because as your team moves along, or if new people get added or subtracted from your team, these might change. And that's still fine. So let's take an example of how you would do this with your team. All right? Take your team in one room. Draw a simple tree on the wall or on a flip chart. The tree needs to have roots, it needs to have leaves, and it needs to have fruits. Ask your team, what do you think are the core values of your team? And ask them to write that on post-its. So one value on one post-it and stick it near the roots. So the roots are the nourishment factor. That is from where your team actually gets your nourishment. So your values can be, we will deliver the best quality software, hypothetically. Or we'll make sure that XP practices are followed. These are your values. You're just saying that we want that. We will be courageous to our clients so that we don't do everything that they're asking for, but we be courageous and give them the best possible things. That's a value. So basically defining your culture, and defining your culture is as important as saying that Agile is a culture and should be followed. Now, once you have defined these values, you need to know the enablers. Let's say one of your values is that pair programming is absolutely essential in order to make sure that more scenarios are identified, reviews happen as quickly as possible so your feedback becomes faster, and you provide good quality code. That's one of your values, all right? What will be the enablers? The enablers would be that your organization is accepting the fact that two people will be working on one piece of requirement. At some level, it means that two people will be doing half the work. Agreed. But you need to make your organizations see, and Scrum Masters, I know that extreme programming is a different thing, but every programming practice that you have with extreme programming or with other similar frameworks, these are things which are highly essential in order to deliver quality software, right? So you have to make these things visible to your organization. As a Scrum Master also, it's your job, even in the Scrum Guide it mentions that you have to be a Scrum Coach to your organization. An Agile Coach is not just to a team, it's to everyone who interacts with the team, which includes the organization. So what will be enablers? One, the enabler would be that your organization completely understands that this is absolutely essential for your quality. And two, your customers need to be educated about these practices so that they understand the value that they get out of these practices. If you do these two things, these are the enablers that will help reinforce your value of pair programming, which gives you high quality code. All right? So those become your enablers. Again, you have to identify the enablers, write it on Post-it, and the enablers goes on the leaves. So the leaves are the ones that actually absorb the energy from the sun and then nourish the entire tree. It's a high performance tree exercise. And then it comes to the fruits. The fruits are the benefits that you will get if your values and enablers are in place. So what are the fruits if you go ahead with pair programming? More scenarios get identified, so your system is logically more complete. You have less bugs because your review is happening in real time. The feedback is faster because you have two people who are looking at what happens. You have two minds working on the same problem, so it can be tackled much faster. So these are a number of benefits that just come from one value that says we'll follow pair programming practices. That's it. Now, once you have done this high performance tree exercise, let's say during retrospectives, you go back to your high performance tree, which should be pasted somewhere near your team all the time. Every retrospective, you see, is the team following the values? If yes, that's good. If not, why so? Are the enablers in place? Have you faced any challenges with the enablers? Are you actually reaping the benefits? Because it may happen that some values and some enablers, you keep on doing it again and again, but you don't see any benefits. That's the time when you should go ahead and change it. As long as your values are being reinforced, your enablers are in place, and your benefits are visible, then you can say that your team is actually a high-performing team. It's just your team. It's not a comparison with other teams. It's your team. All right? Now, once you have a high-performing team, you still need to understand that not everyone in your team is the same. There might be a few freshers in your team which don't even know what agile software development is. There might be a few pros who have been in this business for quite some time and they know everything. And then there might be many people who are in the middle. A few of them may be cynical towards agile because they might be thinking it's just another thing that we do unnecessarily, maybe. And there might be a few people who are actually evangelists of agile. They might be the people who are actually making or encouraging your team to identify new practices in agile software delivery and actually embrace it and go ahead with it. Now, for each of these individuals, they basically are at one of the three levels. They are either at the shoe level, so this is the Shuhari model. The shoe level is the basic level or the novice level, where you're just starting with the things. You don't actually need anything. You don't know anything. Or you can have people at the Ha level, which is the intermediate level. They know enough, but they need to improve. And then you have people at the Re level, which are pros in their fields, and you actually don't need to teach them anything, but they will always come and consult with you. Now, when you're doing one-on-one coaching with these people, which will happen on a daily basis, basically, you will have to treat them or treat their level accordingly so that you can do the right thing that is supposed to be done. If someone is at a basic level, at a shoe level, you would first want to teach them what agile software delivery is all about. Say if there's a person who does not understand or does not know what is test-driven development, they are at the basic stage of TDD. You first need to teach them test-driven development. Now, it may also happen that there are people in your team who know test-driven development and they can do it as well. But let's say if you are responsible for doing it, then you're basically teaching that individual. So that individual is at a shoe level and you need to be a teacher at that point of time. Now let's say that there is someone who's been doing test-driven development for quite some time. But every now and then, they do not pair program when they are doing test-driven development. Now that is an intermediate level for you, and that person is at a higher level. That's a place where coaching is absolutely important. You can have a coaching conversation with that person and you can ask them the reason why they perform their practices as it is needed. TDD is something that they do all the time. But why don't they pair? And you may know that maybe the person is a driver. And if the person is a driver and the person who they are going to pair up with is a fresher, they'll actually feel that the fresher is holding them back. Because achieving goal is more important for them than managing relationships. You have to coach them and make them understand the value that the other person will deliver if this person who is not pairing can help them. Maybe the fresher will not deliver value today, but in a month, they might actually start delivering more value than what they're delivering today. And unless you have people in your team who are enabling the new joiners, this will not happen. So an intermediate stage is where you actually act as a coach. Now let's say someone who's excellent in agile delivery. They know the ins and outs of extreme programming. Do they need a coach? Maybe not. Let's say that this expert has gone to a client location and he has just seen the various different ways how the CI/CD pipeline has been set up for this person. And they understand that the client does not have the best possible cases, which will be the best possible setup for, say, CI/CD. Now, there are constraints on the client side, and we actually cannot do the best possible setup for them. But a setup has to be done, which is better than what they have currently. You might have the expert who comes back to the coach for consulting. They might be looking for advice from the coach. They will provide them their own scenarios, that this is the scenario that the client is facing. They will give their alternatives to the coach. And they will ask the coach, what do you prefer? I think that I should be doing it with alternative A. But if you think that B has more benefits, maybe I would like to know about it. So for experts, coaches are basically advisors or consultants. So although you're an agile coach at different levels with different individuals, you will act differently. And there's something known as reaching and modeling. That is something that you'll have to do. Reaching is basically reaching out to the people, trying to understand their mindset, try to understand where they are and what they do, and coach them. And modeling is actually to create an environment which suits that particular person in order to fit in the best possible practice. So these are two things that you have to do, reaching and modeling. These are slightly wider topics, so we may have to discuss it in detail later, or you can ping me or mail me and we can have a short Skype call if you want to discuss it further. But at different levels with different individuals, you'll end up doing different things. Now let's see what we have done so far. So in the morning before you came to office, you freed up your mind so that you are only present for unbiased discussions with your team. You met different types of personalities when you came to office and you understood their personality and you coached them based on their personality so that it benefits your team the best. You created a team out of these different personalities and you did a high performance tree exercise. And the high performance tree exercise provided the values, the enablers and benefits that your team can actually create. Then you identified the different individuals in your team who may not be enabling your values in order to reach the benefits. So you taught them as a teacher, you coached them, you mentored them, you advised them, you consulted with them, and you created your entire persona of these multiple roles that you can play as a coach. Finally, you have to think of the next steps. This is forward thinking. You might have been a coach of an organization or of a team for weeks or months. And every single day, what you have to do is chalk out a plan for an individual, for a team, and for the organization. You always have to think where your individual stands today and where you want to see them tomorrow. Where your organization stands today, where you want to see them tomorrow. Where your development team stands today and where you want to see them tomorrow. And you have to chalk out a plan that works for them. This is a plan that you should always go and speak with the particular individual or organization or management. You need to be as clear as possible about what is it in your head, and you need to give them the plan so that they understand where they need to be and how they need to go there. Preparing the next steps is one of the biggest things that any agile coach would do on a daily basis. Because it's not just one person that is being coached. There are a number of people. There are a number of people in the organization and teams which have to be coached. Now, there is no straightforward way of preparing these next steps. It depends on everything that we have discussed so far. It depends on the personality of the person. It depends on the level of maturity that they have with software delivery. So your plan needs to cater to every individual personally. As a coach, you need to create a personal relationship with your coachee. You are possibly their best friend or your work spouse. You need to be very clear about their next steps, and they need to be comfortable with the next steps. And that's basically where you have to end up with. So with that, we reach the end of the presentation. If you have questions, we'll discuss it. But if you have more questions and you would like to discuss with me further, you can either find me on my social media handle @AgileMaven, or you can email me at vishal@agilemaven.in. Let me stop sharing the presentation and go and check out the questions. So there's one question, and feel free to add questions to the Q&A, or you can add it to the chat, and I can go ahead, read it, and then I can answer it. Let me see if I can enable the... can someone ping me on chat? Would it make sense if I open it for a discussion so that people can talk here? Okay, let's first answer the questions and then I go to that. So Atharesh asked, many times Scrum teams are so engrossed in their sprint delivery, which is fast-paced and keeps them on their toes. They do not really pay attention to discussions on values, forming high-performance teams, etc. How do you address such disinterest? That's perfectly valid. So let's put it this way. If you go through the Agile Manifesto, there's one principle that talks about you need to proceed at a sustainable pace. So in all sorts, Agile delivery is not about delivering faster or delivering, as you said, on your toes. It's more about delivering at a sustainable pace. And by sustainable pace, it means that your team is not getting distressed. They are not getting tensed. They are not being pressurized for delivery. Now, although I agree that this is something that happens in most of the organizations, and especially if you're in service delivery, this is slightly a common scenario, especially if you have people who have gone to client locations, made promises, and then come back, and then now it's on you to actually deal with it. I would say if you're an Agile coach, or a Scrum Master for that matter, considering it's a Scrum team, it's your responsibility to educate these different parties or different stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I mean everyone in the team and everyone outside the team who are part of your project. You need to make them understand the benefits of a sustainable pace. And there are various different exercises or talks that you can have which will make them realize this important factor. But as a coach, you need to see how your team can move away from fast-paced environment to a sustainable paced environment, because that is more important. There is also a notion of slack time, right? So slack time means your team shouldn't always sprinting. Now, sprints are just another word for iterations. Okay. When you're sprinting, you need to still understand that you have to provide slack time to your team members. Slack provides you time for, say, learning new technologies. It provides you time to think. It provides you time to relax. Slack is something that creates more innovative ideas. Slack is time when people actually discuss and bond as a team. So Slack is very important. So for this particular question, we are saying that you're in a fast-paced environment. You need to move away from fast pace and go to a sustainable pace. And sustainable pace does not have a definition. It's basically what your team can go with. All right? So you have to figure out with your team what is a sustainable pace. Possibly take them away for a half-day exercise, do a high-performance free exercise, and ask them, what do you think will relax them more at their work? Work needs to be fun. It doesn't need to be like stressful. All right? And I understand it's not easy. Agile coaching is not easy. Okay, Siva asks, can there be a role called technical scrum master who conducts the scrum ceremony and also does coding and development? Okay. Technical scrum master is something that I have also started seeing in many places nowadays. I wouldn't see a scrum master is a role. It's not a person. It's a role played by a person. Nowhere in the Scrum guide does it say that a Scrum master should cater to only one team. Okay. A Scrum master can cater to multiple teams, but what Scrum Guide does say is that a Scrum Master should be a full-time Scrum Master, which means that they should always pay attention to enable their teams as much as possible. They are the enablers for the team, right? So that the team is perfectly free in order to go and do what they want to do. Now, let's say that you have a Scrum Master who doesn't have to do a lot of enablement on the team, and they have a lot of time in their hand. If you go by less framework, it would make sense that they become Scrum Masters for multiple teams, so up to 3 teams, so that they are still in the same mindset of being a full-time Scrum Master, but they can enable multiple teams at the same time. If you are saying that there's a Scrum Master who is also doing coding or development, let's for some time say that you're not scrumming. Okay, you're just doing a simple iterative development. Doing simple iterative development need not mean that you're not agile. Let's be honest about that. If you go through the Agile Manifesto for software development, there are 4 values and 12 principles. As long as your team, your Agile software development team, can withhold those 4 values and abide by those 12 principles, they are still agile in nature. All right. So forget the title of a Scrum Master for some time. Let's just say that you have a team which has 1 BA, 1 QA, 2 developers. And the BA says that, hey guys, my workload of churning out requirements is faster than you actually doing it. In that case, I will spend some time in taking care of your enabling matters, something like a Scrum Master. So you don't give them the title, but they can still go ahead and do it. So your Agile team needs to fulfill values and principles. It need not only be Scrum principles. Scrum is an excellent framework. It gives you a free set of mind to do things. And it's not necessary that you always do Scrum. There are other things that you can do as well that makes you agile. So possibly see what are the different things. I wouldn't say that you cannot code if you're a technical Scrum Master, you can code. That would be something that is incorrect, considering that Scrum doesn't have a role like a technical Scrum Master. But you need to see how your team is set up. And if your setup helps you be more agile, there's nothing wrong with it. Right? Okay, Hemal asks, is it compulsory that all people in the team having same number of experience to be part of self-organizing team? Absolutely not. That's a big myth. And here's why it's not the case. Let's give you an example. And I would want you to, okay, let's see if it's Himal, right? Himal, let me see if I can enable. Himal, can you speak? I have started your, so you can unmute yourself and talk if you want.
Hello.
Hey, Himal. Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So that was one of the issue which we are facing since we have started implementing the agile. That due to the fact that we have like 4 teams and I am working as a scrum master for all of 4 teams, but this is one of the concerning area wherein people having different number of experience, so there is hierarchy exists and people are not self-organized. So I would like to know more about how we can resolve those things.
All right, so let's try and understand the fundamental of self-organizing team. Okay?
Yeah.
A software development team or an agile software development team has 2 basic values. I'll just keep you on mute, okay, so that there's no disturbance.
Yes, sure.
Right? So a delivery team has only 2 objectives. They are self-organized and they are cross-functional. And both of these terms are highly confusing. Okay? Let's say that you're a scrum master. If I say that you're a scrum master and these are your 4 team members, and I want you to divide these 4 people into 2 project groups, how would you do it? Emil. So you're a scrum master. I give you, say, 5 people. Okay. I say these are your 5 development team members. You have to divide them into 2 project teams. How would you do it?
So I would pick the the skill set which I would require in a project, and that's how I would pick the people based on the requirement of the project, and I would pick the people and create the team.
All right. So you as a scrum master will pick the people and form 2 teams, right?
Yes.
See, this was actually a trick question. The moment you do that as a scrum master, you have actually lost the factor about self-organization. If your teams would be self-organizing, you would bring those 5 people in a room. As a scrum master, you will tell them, hey guys, you are 5 people. These are 2 projects and we want 2 teams. Go ahead and discuss amongst yourselves how you would divide yourself so that it's the best suitable fit for these 2 people. That's how you actually make a team become self-organized. You're taking a step back so that you can make your teams more independent. And that is the whole purpose of self-organizing.
Agree.
Now say that if you have these 5 people who have different years of experience, and you have these 2 projects where you have to divide them, right?
Yeah.
Let them figure out what will be the best possible solution for them. If they feel that 1 lead and 2 juniors in one team and 2 seniors in another team make a perfect fit, that's your team's decision. And that is basically self-organization. Your team is self-organizing themselves. So you are not actually responsible for it. It is the team who is responsible for it.
Yeah.
So when it comes to this about having similar number of experience, absolutely not. If that would be the case, then you would have had all people above 60 who are in one team and coding. The point about having self-organizing team is so that you can help each other to grow at the same time. Okay, so and considering that we all have this notion of project management in our head where resource management becomes one of the most important things, most of the time self-organization is something that is misunderstood.
Yeah, that is true.
That's the beauty of it, right? You give that responsibility to your team. You don't have to think about their number of years of experience. Let the team figure out.
Yeah, but do you think that if provided that much of freedom to the teammates to decide, like who will be working on what. And if they do not realize that, like, though we say that we'll provide them all the required knowledge, but if we will provide that much of freedom to teammates, do you think that sometimes it will invite the failure of the project itself? Because they may be excited to learn new
Failure,
things,
so
but
failure is not bad, right? And
yeah.
failure always comes with experience. Now here's the thing. There's one principle in the Agile Manifesto that says that we trust our team members that they'll do the best possible work. We need to just trust them. And this is
Yeah,
more like swimming. You push them in water and they will understand that you're basically making them more responsible.
yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
the more responsible you make someone, the faster they grow.
I agree. Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
agree.
I mean, I still understand it is difficult to do, but
Yeah,
try doing it. Even if you try doing it in smaller pieces, possibly it will work out someday.
yeah,
All right?
yeah, yeah. Got it.
Cool, man. Thanks.
Thank.
Okay. Next question. We have one over here. The same one about technical Scrum Master. I hope that was answered. Is there any valuable certification where I can get max knowledge about Scrum and Agile? So there are a number of certifications that you can do. To be honest, certification, and I am a certified trainer, I can also provide certifications, but certifications just mean that you have attended a training. Okay, that does not mean that you are an expert in that area. So instead of looking at certifications, there are a number of trainings which are available, which may or may not be certification courses. I would encourage that you go and see which is the most available in your area. So there are a number of Scrum courses that are provided by Scrum Alliance or Scrum.org. You have Agile courses being provided by IC Agile. You can speak with Shabaz at KnowledgeHut for more details about these certifications. But at the same time, you can go on, say, meetup.com, and you can see if there are any meetups which are happening around you, which provide you more information about Agile delivery or Scrum delivery. You can also go on certain organizations conduct geek nights, or they conduct various, you can say, webinars like these that you can attend. So a lot of it is something that is out there from a knowledge perspective. It need not all be certification courses, and it's your choice how you want to deal with it. So you can go with certification courses or you can go with non-certification courses, but in any of the scenarios, for practical implementation, it is the knowledge and experience that's more important. All right. And one with Aisha, she asked, is it necessary that only a business analyst should become a Scrum Master? Absolutely not. A Scrum Master has their own set of roles and responsibilities. Any person can become a Scrum Master as long as they can fulfill those responsibilities. Okay, and I'm an advocate of cross-functional teams and cross-functional individuals also at some level. So say if you have been a QA for a very long time, if you want to become a BA, as long as you can understand the concepts and the knowledge of business analysis, and then you can perform those responsibilities, you can become one. If you are a developer who wants to become, say, an architect, if you are a programmer who wants to become a QA who wants to become project manager, everything is possible as long as you as an individual can perform those roles and responsibilities. Don't push yourself to play these roles just because it gives you an edge in your career. It is very important that you make sure that the job that you're doing it well. And that is what gives you job satisfaction. That's just my opinion. If you feel otherwise, that's perfectly okay. Right? Okay, that's all of the questions that we had. If you have more questions, feel free to reach out to me at my social media handles, or you can email me at vishal@agilemaven.in. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus, anywhere you want. Just search for Agile Maven. All right. It was really nice talking to you, and thank you all for attending this webinar. I hope you got some valuable information and you found it good. And I'll see you soon with a new topic, say in a few weeks. Thank you, everyone.